Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Crozer. I am the host of the RBL Talk podcast, the original RBL Leipzig podcast in English. I'm an independent podcaster, and just like you who stumbled across this, you want to know if you should join the talkSPORT fan network or any fan network for that matter. This is not to bag talkSPORT or any person that is in a fan network or fan networks in general. This is purely just for educational purposes. We're going to go through the contract that is publicly available on their website, and we'll just go through that, what it means. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything of law in that sense, but always take your time to read everything that you ever come up with when it comes to a contract and signing things. And if you ever need to go get outside help, don't take my just advice for it. Go see an actual lawyer, find out, ask the fan network any questions, and remember, don't be pressured into it. Without further ado, let's go straight into it. So I have the article here. This is on their website, talksport.com/competitions/116 9604 /terms-and-conditions-podcasts. This was published on the 1st of August, 2022, updated so far on the 30th of September last year. As time of recording, this is on the 1st of March. So this is going to go through the whole entire contract. We'll go through it all bit by bit, and we'll go into all that. So they go, these terms and conditions, the podcast is together with a sub-up form-up from the standard terms and conditions supplied by you or audio content on talkSPORT's designated fan network on the platform, in brackets agreement. The term of this agreement will be 12 months. That's just always good to know straight off the bat how long you're going to be into an agreement. So you are locked in here for 12 months as of the point of this reading, from the date that you submit the sign-up form, at which time it'll automatically expire. So before you get into anything further, you know that you're going into a 12-month commitment. You may not necessarily get your contract renewed with the podcast network. So number one, it says, during the term of the agreement, you may produce one-off or a series of audio content demonstrating your opinion of the football at your club and the wider football ecosystem, podcasts on the term and conditions of this agreement. So far, that's already a good thing. So you don't have to make a weekly show or a 3 times weekly show, or you can go once a month. You could do it once every 3 months, things like that. So you're not having to produce as amount of content to fulfill your contract requirements. So it says nothing in this agreement shall oblige talkSPORT to retain the podcast on the platform or for you to provide podcasts. The fee and or revenue share applicable to this agreement has been agreed between you and talkSPORT. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of what the revenue share or anything like that was for me. That'll be dependent on if you either want to join talkSPORT or they come to speak to you, which they actually reached out to me and spoke to me. And look, it's about normal from what you would expect, because talkSPORT just aren't the only one that have come for me as well. This is just the latest one, and I wanted to use their contract because they're a reputable brand and they are actually a good company that you could be doing work for with your podcasting creation. So, this is not to, like I said, not to bag talkSPORT or anything like that. This is just to go through it and understand what you're reading and understand what you are obligations to provide and things like that. And it's not just talkSPORT, it could be any fan network. You don't necessarily have to be doing this for sport podcasts. It could be any sort of network that you are joining. So the alarm bell that I have in that perspective, where it says nothing in this agreement shall oblige talkSPORT to retain the podcast on the platform or for you to provide podcasts. Now that little part there, you to provide podcasts, is key. It's critical. It means that you don't need to turn around and make sure that you're producing content for the network. But it does mean that they don't need to keep your podcast, the RSS feed, active on their network, which is a big thing. That's the only issue that I had with talkSPORT. Their values line up to me. They're a great company. I hope I can work for them or have a partnership, I should say, with them sometime in the near future. But when it comes to being an independent podcaster, you own all the rights to your content and you need to ultimately control your RSS feed. So as soon as you give up control of your RSS feed, then you may lose access completely to your show, which we'll get into later on. Production of the podcast. So 2.1. In the event that you provide podcast, you shall produce and or provide original professional quality audio content using your own equipment provided at your own cost in a competent manner and be the full extent of your skills and ability. All podcasts must be submitted in accordance with the following. So A, each podcast shall include all appropriate warnings and disclaimers, including the following. This podcast has been created and uploaded by, insert the name of the copyright owner, which is yourself, or your co-hosts, or whatever your podcast is, and creator of the podcast, which should be the same. The views in this podcast are not necessarily the views of talkSPORT. That there is very good already from talkSPORT. It means that you need to not be careful what you say, so to speak. So obviously you can't break certain rules and laws. You can't, be racist and things like that. That has no acceptance in any sort of thing. You can't have any hate speeches or anything like that. But you can be critical of a player without being, an idiot, I guess you could say, for lack of better wording, and doing things. You criticize them for their football. You don't have to criticize them be prejudiced in any manner, because you cannot be prejudiced, especially in those type of matters. So B is Acast, who they work with. Me, I personally tried Acast podcasting. It didn't work out for me. I just didn't like their platform. I currently use Captivate and have been happy with Captivate for several years now. They just make my life a lot more easier. And as an independent podcaster, you need to make sure that you're happy with the podcast host that you pick. So there's many out there. I'm not going to go into detail of that specifically, but make sure that you do your research. And, you can always swap and change podcast hosts, but you can have some delays on your RSS feed delivery if you do it too often. All podcasts must be consistent within the warranties and representation of the clause 6.22. The parties agree that your obligation to comply with this clause 2 is a material term of the agreement. 2.3, talkSPORT and the platform provider are under no obligation to use, publish, distribute, or syndicate the podcast, and each of them may remove any inappropriate content or any podcast containing inappropriate content in their sole discretion, excuse me, without prior notification to you or any third party. Now, the only issue that I have there with that is that it doesn't actually say what, and we'll go further down. It may be there, but I couldn't find it because I had a bit of a read of this before I started this video, that it doesn't look like they define what inappropriate content are. Obviously, we've gone a little bit into that a little bit before, where we said, racism and things like that, not acceptable no matter what. You can't be doing things like that. So obviously that's inappropriate content, but it's very vague here, which in a sense is also to protect talkSPORT or any other podcast network who has a similar contract like this. It gives them basically a lot of leeway. So if you've done something in the past and, it doesn't look good with whatever that may be, whether it's to do with any topic around the world, they have a basically vague license to turn around and just be like, oh, well, we're going to maybe not work with you in the future, or we're not going to, for lack of better things off the top of my head here, because this is not scripted, that you say the wrong thing and then it gets portrayed as that you are a certain person when you're not. And, your identity may not be someone they want to have working with them. So, which is understandable. But at the end of the day, you have to look after your own image. And as a company, they have to look after their own image as well, and everyone that works with them. Advertising and sponsorship. Unless agreed otherwise in writing, talkSPORT shall have the exclusive right to create and sell or authorize a third-party agency to create and sell at the sole discretion of talkSPORT advertisements, sponsorships, or promotions relating to the podcast or any episode thereof, and serve such advertisements, sponsorships, or promotions on the platform advertising rights. yep, that's okay. The only thing that you would need to ask if you sign up with a platform is that how much of your content can they have access to? And there's a part which is coming up in a moment. It says copyright usage and license. This is where it really gets into the nitty gritty of what license you're giving them as a person of your own likeness and image and things like that. If nowadays and age there's AI and other things, if they're able to do things like that. Excuse me. So going into copyright usage and license, 4.1 says you shall remain a copyright owner of the podcast for the full term of the copyright. You hereby grant to the talkSPORT the following rights in respect of the podcast submitted under this agreement. Excuse me. Sorry. So the thing there is it already says that you shall remain the copyright owner of the podcast for the full term of the copyright. A copyright is, so talkSPORT are from the UK. You'd need to do a little bit of research for that. But normally copyright is around about 100 years from when you've done the podcast episode or something like that, or a certain time frame afterwards, like your passing. It might be 100 years after that as well. Like I said earlier, I'm not a lawyer. I don't follow up with copyright laws. You do your own research, make sure that you understand what copyright that you still hold. Although they say that you shall remain the copyright owner of the podcast, you're also going to be giving them a full, undisclosed, unlimited, basically license to redistribute and do what they need to do as a podcasting platform to market your product, whether they market with other podcasts or just on their websites and things like that. These are things that when you speak to a podcast network that you need to make sure that you ask them as well, because they'll go through all of that with you. It's not just always put out sometimes in these terms and conditions. For the full term of the copyright, including all renewals, revivals, revisions, and extensions, and thereafter, insofar as possible, in perpetuity and irrevocable, exclusive, sub-license or license to use, reproduce, make available, publish, and distribute the podcast via the platform and the talkSPORT's platforms in all forms of media known now or in the future anywhere in the world. So, like I said, that's also fine. Just be very careful though with that, because you need to be careful that if you say you don't be with the podcasting network for, the contract stated up above, it's, if you go into this, it's 12 months. So do everything that you create 12 months in that. Can they do as they wish with? Or is it after that as well that you need to make sure that your content, because you've worked with them in the past, can anything that you do or say in the future be reproduced and used by them as well? So these here are things that you need to ask it and make sure, because if you own all the copyright to your content, does that mean in the copyright laws that, like I said, let's just go with the year of 100 years from the episode creation, does that mean that you're going to have them be able to do what they want with your content for 100 years? And if they've marketed it or anything and they're making profitable money from it, are you still going to be entitled for any sort of royalties or anything like that afterwards, after you cease an agreement with them, which in this contract that we're going through, as I said earlier, doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be reproduced again after 12 months. So it could just be a 12-month contract and that's it. For the full term of the copyright, including all renewals, revivals, revisions, and extensions, and thereafter, insofar possible, as per treaty, regular sub-license to exploit the advertising rights, you acknowledge that you agree that talkSPORT shall own all intellectual property rights to the trademarks of talkSPORT, talkSPORT Fan Network, and Fan Network, and all other brands, podcast titles, and trademarks of talkSPORT, whether registered or not. That there is a very big thing. As a company, you need to make sure that you always look after yourself as number one. So you go from the company's perspective, talkSPORT, you're working with them, but you don't have any rights to the talkSPORT name, the brand, the image, or anything like that. So for instance, if you were to work with talkSPORT or another company, basically they're saying that you acknowledged and you agree that they still own all their own rights to their own intellectual property and everything from the marketing of their company. You don't have access to any of that. Complaints. You shall immediately notify talkSPORT in writing of any complaints in connection with the podcast and subject to clause 7, which is a bit further down. Resolve all complaints in accordance with any and all laws, including consumer protection laws and data protection legislation, and comply with any reasonable instructions from talkSPORT in respect of the same. That there, perfectly fine. That's basically protecting the company and also protecting yourself. That if there is a complaint, for instance, me as an independent podcaster, if I'm working with a fan network, then if I have someone give me a complaint for something, I need to make sure that the fan network that is helping distribute or monetize my product is aware of any such complaints, whether they be great or small, that it protects us both from liabilities. Warranties and indemnity. You hereby warrant and represent to talkSPORT that A, you are the sole owner of the podcast and you have full authority to enter into this agreement. B, you have secured all necessary third-party permissions and releases, waivers and consents, including from persons appearing in the podcast, necessary to grant talkSPORT the right and in the podcast expressed to be granted under this agreement. C, the podcast does not and will not contain any content that infringes the copyright or any other rights of any third party, including any right of confidentiality or privacy. And D, you shall ensure that the podcast complies with and is in compliance with all applicable laws, codes, and regulations, including but not limited to broadcast, including the Ofcom Broadcasting Code, which is available at, and then it's got a website here, for policies and guidelines, which are available at, and another web link, and all laws regarding defamation, content privacy, and data protection, and not as a result of any harassment, bribe, or any other illegal activity. And there's some more legal stuff as well, which I'll go into in a minute. Just wanted to stop there. So this here is a website which is public domain. You can easily find this. And I wanted to use this as a guide. Like I said, and I'll keep saying, I'm not a lawyer. I don't go into legal stuff like that. I don't study law. This is just an informational purpose, educational for people that are independents. They may not want to, go seek a lawyer and have to pay to get in something. This is just for informational purposes. So you know what and how you're reading it and things like that. And so that's just all the legal things like that, which no matter where you go, you need to make sure that you always abide by the law. So for me, I do podcasting, and as an independent, I have to go by many laws. So I live in Australia, so I have to have an Australian business number. So I declare any income. So you don't do any tax fraud or anything like that. Whether it's a small amount of money you earn or a big amount of money, you have to abide by that no matter where you are around the world. I had to sign agreements as well with the European Union and the US, wherever my podcast can also be brought from. So for instance, my podcast is on Apple Podcasts. So there's a thing there that you need to make sure that you read and understand if you're going to monetize your own product, which is what I do. I monetize my products. I do everything myself. And me personally, I don't mind working with people, who that may be. However, just at this time, and I'll go further down once we get into the back end of this, only the reason why that I didn't sign up with talkSPORT. And there's no problem with them or anything like that. I don't think that they have any bad intentions or anything like that. I just think that if you're not careful, you as an independent podcaster watching this, you may not be getting what you wanted or expected. So always make sure that you read these fine prints and always make sure that you ask the follow-up questions. There's no silly question or anything like that. If you're really considering and wanting to work with a podcasting platform, all you have to do is just, ask them, hey, what's going on? I don't understand this, and, go further into that. So 6.2, you agree to indemnify, which basically means, I'll double check to look it up. But from what I remember looking up, it was like compensate for harm or loss, which that's what it says here. I don't know if you can read that, but that was just a look up on my MacBook. And keep informed on demand talkSPORT and any group company of talkSPORT, the platforms and the podcast advertisers and sponsors against all actions, claims, costs, liabilities, and losses, including legal costs, which may be made against it or them, which they may incur, which relate to arise directly from any breach of you of the terms of this agreement. You further agree to indemnify, so talkSPORT on demand against all actions, claims, costs, liabilities, and losses, including legal costs of whatever nature which may be brought to you by you relating to the arising of this agreement, including but not limited to any claim for employment or worker status or association rights. So that there is basically saying that if you've done anything wrong and there's any legal costs that talkSPORT need to do in either one, defending themselves or defending you because of something that has happened, and you obviously need to be upfront, as it says earlier, that you need to let them know with any complaints or any issues that you may feel may be controversial or anything like that, which protects both the company, the parent company, talkSPORT, and yourself, that you need to make sure that whatever the costs and outlay that they have put out, that you need to make sure that you pay that back. Number 7, protection of rights and conducting claims. You shall notify talkSPORT of any actual or threatened A, infringement of the copyright in, or B, any other legal dispute that arises over the podcast or this agreement. That's fine. 7.2, talkSPORT may, at its own expense and as it sees fit, take responsible steps to protect the copyright and other rights in the podcast, and when necessary, you shall be also take the steps to protect these rights. 7.3, these are all stock standard, no problems whatsoever. These are things that you would do naturally as a podcaster, and also that they will do because they also need to look out for you, because their best interest is due, because talkSPORT are here for the fans, and their podcast network is really good and really alluring, especially for people that, can't or, don't know what they're doing and that they want to be successful. And, sometimes a fan network, is best for certain people. And this is what this informational video is all about, just for literally to find out that if you want or should be signing up. You shall assist talkSPORT with any complaint or claim by providing honest, transparent, timely information and access to all records. No problems with those. Where a complaint or claim relates to material published on the platform, talkSPORT has the right to assume full conduct of the proceedings. Basically, that's saying that if there is any legal issues that go to court or anything like that, and you're the one that has, you published the content, excuse me, talkSPORT has the right to assume full conduct of the proceedings. So essentially that they're going to speak on your behalf. This is what my understanding of this here. And they will make sure that the best outcome is for themselves and also for you. So basically, you're giving them permission to be your lawyer, so to speak. If there is a concern that the podcast might raise legal or a regulatory issue, you shall discuss this with a legal advisor and notify talkSPORT of the issue before uploading the podcast onto the platform. So this is basically saying that if I was to join, I wanted to join now, then I would go, okay, if there's any sort of legal issues, then I need to make sure that they're fully aware of it, and also I'm fully aware for it. So, for instance, if I had guests come on my show, which I've had multiple guests, if a couple of them turned around and said, no, I don't want to, or even just one of them, I don't want to be on the talkSPORT platform because of, maybe they just don't like talkSPORT for whatever reason. I don't see why they would say that, but, let's just say that that's what they wanted. You need to respect their privacy and their copyright and, things like that. So, with myself, when it comes to having guests on the podcast, at any point in time, all they need to do is ask me and speak to me and go, hey, I don't want to be on the podcast anymore. Maybe they don't want to be affiliated with me, the RB Leipzig as a club or international podcast, or let's just say maybe they decided to pick a different team that they support. So instead of them picking another team and they want to just erase all their old history or something, I don't know why a fan would be like that, but let's say that they did for whatever reason, then I need to respect that. And I've asked them just to email me, and I'm happy to re-record the episode by just removing the interview with them. And also for YouTube, if it's a video format as well, just completely remove that video. Then payment terms, there's no issues with here. this is basically saying, I will read it out anyway, but there's no issues with this. It's basically saying that, they're going to pay you for, monetization. So for instance, whoever they work with ads and things that get put into your podcast feed, you get paid a certain amount of money, which it says earlier that you would work out what that is, what percentage that is. And then they're going to pay you the share of the net advertising and sponsorship revenue, or zero if no impressions have been generated in relation to the relevant podcast agreed in writing, including email, within 60 days of receiving such revenue. The confidentiality, which is a big thing. It says here, you can also pause the video at this time and read this because I'm sharing the full tab here. So I won't read this in full detail. But in short, it's just saying that you agree during the term of the agreement and its expiry or termination that you keep all information strictly secret and confidential, which is the reason why I haven't said certain things. So there's private emails that I've spoken to with, which I'm not going to discuss who they are, what was said, or anything like that. So because this website is public domain, you can look it up and find it yourself. So anything like that, you don't disclose. It's the same thing if they speak to you about things. Like, for instance, if you are working with them, they might turn around and might tell you something like an article or a news story or something before it comes out. So just like with any workplace, it's like company secrets. You can't turn around and just tell people, you're not even, your best friend, not the person that you live with, like your, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever. You can't do any of that. You have to keep it strictly between the people that tell you from the fan network company. In this case, it's talkSPORT, and yourself. It's simple as that. And the data protection is basically the exact same thing. It's going through here that, there's many sort of agreements. One is, UK, some is European Union and things like that. You need to always make sure that you abide by your, legislations and data when it comes to just anything that you do when you put anything on the internet. That's just how things are. And then the payment tax and status, there was no issues with that either. Basically what this will be saying is that they pay you, I think it may be a gross income, but if there is taxes or anything like that you need to pay, you need to also do that. So for myself, if there's extra taxes that I need to pay from working with them, so to speak, I would have to pay any sort of UK taxes or anything like that, maybe any European taxes. And then because I'm a registered sole trader in my country of Australia, then I would also need to pay any added taxes on top of that per year. And then the miscellaneous is just the anything that basically isn't put in anywhere else. It just says heading in bold type, and these terms and conditions are inserted for convenience and shall not affect their interpretation or construction in any way. If any term of this agreement shall be deemed invalid, void, or unforeseeable, that term shall be severable, which means it will be removed, and shall not affect the validity and enforceability of any remaining terms. talkSPORT may assign the benefit of this agreement and any additional agreement terms and conditions pertaining to a podcast, provided that talkSPORT procedures and the assignee is bound by the obligation to pay the percentage of net syndication revenue payable to you. The parties agree that this agreement is the entire agreement between the parties and shall be subject to and constructed in accordance with English law, because they're a company from England, so that's the main law, English law, and under exclusive jurisdiction of the English courts, except for members of talkSPORT. A person who is not a party to this agreement shall have no rights under the Contracts Rights of Third Parties Act 1999, or otherwise to rely upon or enforce any term of this agreement. And then it's just got definitions, what platform it is, what the platform provider does, and anything else like that. So in closing, I think talkSPORT is a great company. I honestly align well with their values as well, where it's for fans to make their content and have it distributed and get better access to Also helps give a platform for, just average fans to get their voices out and things like that. Me, I've been doing podcasting since 2022, and I've done everything solely on my own back. And it's not any case of, not wanting to work with the company or anything like that. Like I said earlier, I'm quite happy to hopefully work with talkSPORT or another company in the future. But the only reason why that I didn't sign with talkSPORT was just for the fact here when it was the first parts that we went over, where it said that with the podcasting, they cannot retain the podcast on the platform or for you to provide the podcasts. So it means that at any stage they can remove the content or for you not to be able to have access to the content. Although you own all the content, that there was just a little bit alarming to me. And like I said, this is just for educational purposes. I'm not a lawyer. This may be misconstrued or something like that. And if you would like to let me know down in the comments what this really means or anything like that, then let me know. The comments are going to be like an open chat as well. So the only thing that I have at the moment is I have a workflow. I do my hosting with Captivate. Everything is smooth sailing for me. I've never had any issues. I basically do my audio and video recording. So this is the first time I've done a video recording with Descript. But I do my audio content with Descript. And basically once I've finished doing my audio content, I click one button and it imports it into Captivate. I write up my show notes. Captivate automatically gives access to the podcast as well into Apple Podcasts, which people don't have to go through. You can go directly through their own billing platform, which will be directly through me. But everything is all heavily integrated. It's very easy to use. I can't recommend Captivate enough for any independent podcaster that's willing to spend a little bit of money, because at the end of the day, if you get something for free, and I'm not saying talkSPORT are like this or anything like that, same thing with any free hosting provider, but the general consensus is if it is free, you are the product. So instead of becoming a product, the best thing is for you to pay for your hosting yourself and control everything yourself, because then you ultimately get to decide what happens with your podcast and where it goes. So I did speak and saying to talkSPORT that I was quite happy for them to send me sound bites and things like this. Captivate also has a section in their podcast where you can see my recent listener history and things like that as well, so they can get the analytics, and I'd be happy to send them that. But they were insistent that for their network to function as a whole, they use Acast, so you have to sign on board to them. And that's okay. Acast is also a good platform. It just wasn't a good platform for me as a podcasting host. So you need to make sure that, these are okay for you. And it was just a little alarming that in these terms and conditions, it was basically saying that nothing in this agreement shall oblige talkSPORT to retain the podcast on the platform. And, any time then it said here that under no obligation to use, publish, distribute, or syndicate the podcast, and each of them may remove any inappropriate content. Look, that's okay, but it's so vague that, what happens with my content? What legal grounds do I have? It's these are the things that you just need to be very careful of when you sign up and sign on board, just in case, because you don't want to put in all your hard work that you've done for your podcasting or through your podcasting journey, and then, end up going to not be able to, redistribute your podcast at a later date. So after the 12 months, what happens then? Will they just release the feed to you? They said that you own all your content, which is fantastic. But at the end of the day, how much of a hassle is it going to be if you move away from a fan network? So in closing, make sure that fan networks are good for you and your podcast and how you're going to set up, and make sure that, you understand any legal risks that you're going to get into, that it may be harder for you to move away from podcasting hosts. And my advice personally is that if you can see a long-term partnership with a podcasting fan network, whether it's talkSPORT or anyone else, and you're not going to think about leaving in 12 months time or whenever, if they can keep renewing your contract year after year and you work and have a long, successful partnership with them, then you have nothing to worry about. Otherwise, you need to make sure that you can control your RSS feed at all costs, because at the end of the day, that is where your content gets hosted and that is where your content is. So until next time, I've been Justin Crozer. Bye-bye for now.